Hi there, and welcome back to the CKM Red Rugby League channel. Today we have dug out a classic by popular demand. And by popular demand, I mean absolutely no one asked for it, but we're doing it anyway. It is Last Week in Rugby League. Myself and Luke will be taking you through some of the big news stories from the last 7 days of the greatest game of all. Plenty to discuss. Send-offs, transfers, legends leaving. It seems to be all going off in sort of the last 7 days. First things first, how are you going, mate?
Mate, I'm alive. I'm very happy. You'll see it if you watch the preview next week, but your man's 4-3 up. I'm very happy. It's been a great week for my Parramatta Eels. We snuck one in against the Warriors. But love and life. How are you?
Yeah, not so good now you've mentioned that. I mean, got a feel for the Warriors there. I had them tipped to come up with the win. You know, unfortunately beaten by the Eels and the ref. So
we'll turn it up. Turn it up.
So I'll tell you what. While we're on the topic of that game, let's get into that one. The Tavanga sin bin. It's raised a few eyebrows. A lot of people have said that it wasn't a punch. It was Tavanga having hold of Nathan Brown's jersey and trying to then push him away. But obviously the bunker see differently. It's I mean. What's your thoughts on it? Go on, let's give your views first.
my views as a biased Parramatta fan, an openly biased Parramatta fan, is that it wasn't a sin. It turned the game around. It was a jersey punch at best, a penalty maybe, if that. But yeah, Parramatta scored what, 2 converted tries in the 10 minutes that Tavanga was out. It turned all the momentum in Parramatta's favour. Look, you can't give the on-field referee much crap about it because there are a couple of times where the bunker overruled him with it being quite contentious. Yeah, definitely not a sin bin though. You look at it any way you want. Surely even the most one-eyed, biased blue and gold fan can say that's not a sin bin.
Yeah, when I was watching the game, it raised a few eyebrows because there was, I mean, people have took various stills of things. So you've got a still where Nathan Brown's got his knee on Tavanga's head, and that's what causes him to lash out. You've got the slow motion replay. Of course, everything looks substantially worse in slow motion. So you've got Tavanga actually then coming up, and then it didn't even look like a punch. It was more like the base of his hand, if anything. And it seemed to me he had hold of the jersey, and I mean, you've got to, as a professional, not put any doubt in a referee's mind because the game is cracking down on things like that, things like violence, punching, anything that basically would bring a referee into a game. It's your job as a professional to make sure you basically don't give them any reason to. But it just did seem soft for me. If you're going to do anything, give a penalty, put it on report. That's as far as that should have gone. But surely, if it was a punch and it was seen as a punch, regardless of how light it was, it's contact with the head. It's a punch, and it should have been red, if anything. Then, by the laws of the game, I'm not saying that I personally believe it should have been red. I'm saying if the bunker truly believed that was a punch that made contact with Nathan Brown's chin, it should be a red card by the letter of the law.
Well, if we're talking international, yeah, it wasn't that long ago that there'd be brawls and, you know, especially, I mean, granted, we're talking rep level, but, you know, you'd have brawls. You're in State of Origin 8, 9, 10 years ago, and they'd be like, right, you had fun? Cool. Got it out of you? Cool. Don't do it again. And even when it came through like rugby league land, it's only a send-off if it's a KO punch. You know, case in point, who was it? Ben Flower?
Ben Flower once higher, yeah.
Yeah. You know, those kind of punches, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, something like that, nah, absolutely not. I mean, Cam Smith last year got sin binned for a little palm to the face. I'd argue that probably looked worse than the jumper punch. that we saw on the weekend. But look, it is what it is. The Warriors got dudded again against Parramatta. It seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment. The Warriors and the Sea Eagles getting dudded by the refs against the mighty blue and gold Parramatta Eels. Not that they're going to really do much in the finals anyways. But look, I don't think that was even the most contentious thing of the weekend. Chad Townsend, we'll jump on to his send-off. A leaping shoulder charge, takes out Kalen Ponga. I don't know if it was that itself or something else that broke Ponga's nose, but Ponga's now being rested this week for Newcastle. That's the news coming out of the Newcastle Herald and Barry Toohey. And again, it wasn't that long ago that was a cracking hit, but now it's 3 weeks on the sideline.
Yeah, so it's 3 weeks if Townsend accepts the guilty plea, 5 weeks if he potentially tries to overrule it at the judiciary. If he's smart, it takes 3 weeks. But there's things that, so one of the things that came out of Newcastle yesterday was that they worry about Ponga now because Ponga seems to be coming under a lot of fire, and it's almost like they feel like the better players are being targeted. Well, no duh. Any coach that's worth anything will tell you, go hard on the big game players. If you're tackling him, don't just try and bring him to the floor. Go in around the ribs and make sure he don't want to come again. Because that's rugby league for you. You don't go out trying to injure someone, but you'll definitely try to make them feel a little bit of pain when they're running, because that's how you take them out of the game. You knock the confidence. So, I mean, that statement in itself is a bit of a non-runner for me, but there were things in the build-up to that, which, I mean, first things first, if you're going to go through it play by play, I think it was Townsend that put up the kick. So immediately he's frustrated because Ponga takes it on the full and he gives away a 7 tackle set because of, 20-meter restart. Ponga's then racing out to get it tapped. Referee spots that Wade Graham is down in back play. So because there's a trainer on the field and a potential of a break, puts his hands up, gives a signal, time off, wait there. Ponga reacts to that. Townsend doesn't. So Ponga slows all his momentum. Townsend keeps going, and yes, the tackle's bad. It's a shoulder charge, no doubt. Anybody that tries to tell me he tried to wrap the arm has never seen a proper video of any sort of tackle technique. Because you can see the right, I think it's the right arm, is still tucked as he's coming in. So it's a non-runner of an argument of trying to wrap his arm. So Ponga slows off. Townsend makes the connection because either one, he's not heard the call, or two, he's got too much momentum and he can't pull out. So I think if we're going in the context of that's a shoulder charge and Ponga's still going off the 20-meter line at full momentum, that tackle looks nowhere near as bad as it did, because it's the fact that it hits Ponga and Ponga nearly does a backwards somersault, Blake Ferguson-esque. And he hits the floor with a good bit of contact. And I think Townsend, as soon as he made the connection, he knew, because, I mean, one, it's a shoulder charge, two, it's contact with the head. Regardless of whether it's a tickle or a full whack, you're going for it, and there's nothing that can be done, because, again, 10 years ago, well, not even 10 years ago because it's contact with the head, but you know what? That one would have made highlight reels of big hits for a long time 10 years ago. But in today's game, where players are more protected and there's more onus on concussions and head injuries, it's the right decision. He had to go, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, just for those interested, the NRL have now come out and said that the Tavanga sin binning was incorrect. Not that we needed them to come out and say it. But, yeah, if you look back years ago now, back when I first started watching rugby league, the Simon O'Dwyer hit on, was that on Warrior Hargraves? I think at the very start of his career.
Yeah, the one that leaves him absolutely concussed and crawling around the floor.
Yeah, that was contact to the head. 15 years, I think it was 15 years ago, nearly 15 years ago. That was a huge hit. That hit's still celebrated today. He's still a cult legend with the Tigers based on that hit. Never mind what happened after. But, if that happens today, he's gone for 5 weeks. Even if, it's tough because you have that group of fans that wants to bring back the biff, that wants to bring back the shoulder charge, that wants to bring the nitty gritty stuff of the 80s and the early 90s back. But at the same time, we know so much more now about the impacts of hits like a shoulder charge. If it does, in this case, as it does with Townsend and Ponga, collect them in the head. Or, we don't need to look too deep into it to see what punches to the head can do in the long term if you cop a decent chunk of them. Or, if you get them in the right spot, a la Hohaya or Ben Ross, back when he was playing for the Sharks. So, look, it is what it is. The send-off was deserved. 3 weeks, probably, you think about it, intentional, high impact. A send-off is an automatic 1 week anyways. 3 is probably about where it should be, but it's not going to matter, I think, in the grand scheme of things. The Sharks aren't going to make an impact in the finals. Ponga probably was going to get rested at one point or another anyways. It just so happens that now he's got the reason to. They can slowly put him through concussion protocol. They can try and fix that nose. That thing looked like a balloon earlier today, and they can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, as well, before we actually started recording, I did notice that, well, for anyone that does already know, Chad Townsend has his own YouTube channel, and he's brought out a video this morning called In His Words, where he actually talks through the shoulder charge. I've not had a chance to watch it yet, so that could be an interesting one if you've given this a watch and thought, maybe we've got this one wrong. Maybe listen to what he has to say, see how he defends himself. But it's jury by media, unfortunately, for Townsend, because he will be copping a lot of flack from Cronulla fans who have already been pretty frustrated with some of his performances this year, and Knights fans who now feel like, oh, we've lost our star player for the week because you came out of the line and you were a bit irrational.
But Knights fans have always been like that, mate. It's fine.
Speaking of shoulder charges, one man that basically made the shoulder charge the ultimate weapon, Sonny Bill Williams, he came back this week. It was a short return, but we put up a post on our Facebook page. Sonny Bill Williams returned in 3 words. I think your response was, did his job.
Yeah, pretty much. It was 13 minutes, 4 runs for 29 meters, an offload, 5 tackles. It wasn't pretty. For all media hype, not remotely worth it, but he did his job. He did what was asked of him. Didn't need to do anything more in the context of the game. Didn't underperform for the role that he had. Obviously, he's unfit. He hasn't played in 6 months. Thank you, Toronto. He hasn't got the same spark as he did when he left 5 years ago. He played a completely different game, similar role, but a completely different game. And, he's got to get back and work himself into it. The only issue that I have with his return, well, 2 issues. One, the media hype, because it wasn't worth it. Josh Morris' 300th game got completely overshadowed by it. And that's 3 times as big of anything that Sonny Bill has done in the league. Crucify me if you want. But what's with everyone saying, oh, he's not worth it, he's not worth the money? What's he on, a couple of $100,000?
I think the NRL chipped in half of his contract, so I think the Roosters chipped in something like 400 for him, which means I think that he's on 800 overall, which I'm not sure about. Don't quote me on that. It could have been 400 and the NRL pay half, or it could be 400 that the Roosters pay and then topped up further by the NRL. I'm not 100% though.
Maybe. The thing is that Mitch, I'm not 100% sure if Mitch Alderson ended up being cleared to play. But if he was, I really, really hope that Alderson is not losing game time here because of Sonny Bill's return. SBW, as good as a player as he may have been once upon a time for the Roosters, didn't have a great impact at Toronto to start the year in the limited games that he did play. He doesn't have the versatility. He's not a middle forward. He doesn't have the ability to play centre. Doesn't have the ability, things went up crap creek, to play 5'8". Orbison's done that. He's done all of that in his 301 career games so far. He's a much better weapon, albeit maybe not as impactful. I really hope that from Orbison's perspective, that he's not getting left out of teams from here on out because the Roosters are essentially having to play Sonny Bill to justify the contract.
Yeah, I tell you, so there's two things in there for me. One, what could Sonny Bill Williams have done in that game to justify the hype other than score with every touch or set up a try with every touch? Because I feel like, barring doing that, there is literally nothing he could have done in order to basically justify. Because, I mean, let's face it, the people that Sonny Bill Williams remember, the Sonny Bill Williams that people remember, is the guy who came back to the NRL, aged 30, had a few good games at the Roosters, wasn't a huge impact, but from a like merchandising and corporate perspective, was huge for the club because, I mean, let's face it, he'll make plenty of money just by people slapping his name on shirts, people wanting to be associated with the shirts, auctioning off his special edition shirts, because obviously you can't put things like Unibet or Neds on any of his jerseys because his cultural beliefs are and his religious beliefs are that they're not supposed to be on there. So obviously his jerseys are slightly different and usually have charities attached to them. So you can auction those jerseys, very much like Toronto did. So that's the real impact of Sonny Bill off the field. On the field, though, now you're dealing with a 35-year-old who hasn't played rugby league for 6 months. Yes, the guy's an absolute machine. He's incredibly fit. He's substantially more fit than your average 35-year-old. But if you put any 35-year-old into this game that's this sped up, having not played for 6 months, you know, Brett and Josh Morris, they're 33 now, I think. Just
34.
Yep, just racked up 300 NRL games. But they've played consistently. They've been able to get into that groove and follow the transition of the game. They've gone through that six again. And when you're a back six again, benefits you massively. But if you're a forward and people are coming at you and you're thinking, right, okay, fifth tackle coming, great, I'm going to get a rest and then I'll take a hit up. And then all of a sudden a restart gets called. You're going, Jesus Christ, get me a rest. And that's what happened. He, like I said, he's not played for 6 months. I don't know what people were expecting out of SBW, but to expect him to come back and do something massive off the get-go, it's an unreal expectation. And like you said, you've still got Orbison waiting in the wings. I think if it wasn't for the fact that Crichton came back this week, I think Orbison would have probably got the nod. But I do worry that because Robinson's not going to drop Butcher. He's not going to drop Collins. He's definitely not going to drop Crichton. Tupanua maybe, but even so, he's been killing it this year. He has so much speed and versatility to your pack. You've got to ask the question now: where does Orbison get a game if you're just bringing SBW off the bench for 15, 20 minutes every week?
Well, all right. Well, let's very cheekily pull up the team list from that Roosters game. Now, obviously, it wasn't a superb performance by any suggestion, but the Roosters did enough. They beat the grand finalists from last year. You can't drop Cordner. Cordner, he's your captain. No point in doing that. Crichton, Butcher, Lindsay Collins, Sonny Bill, Tupanua, Isaac Liu. I think realistically you can drop any of them. You can't drop Sonny Bill because of the amount of coin that he's making. I read somewhere that just his little 13-minute cameo resulted in an extra $13 million in potential marketing and advertising revenue just off that game alone. So, from a financial standpoint, the NRL could be very much like, hey, you've got to put him in there so we can hype him up. So, so we can bring some more money in. I mean, Orbison's always going to be named in the 21. Where you might get the games, if you look at the next 3 rounds for the Roosters, is them resting some of their stars. They've got the Knights this week, 4th versus 6th, but realistically, the Roosters should get up there. Round 19, they play the Sharks. Again, realistically, should get up there. You could rest Cordner or Tupanua and bring Orbo in there just as like a 20-minute bench player. Round 20, they come up against the Rabbitohs. I think realistically, you go with your best 17 there. It is a grudge match. But still, if there's any slight thought of a knock, the Roosters aren't going to take a risk knowing that they are in the top 4. They've got a game in hand and a very good points differential. As long as they can potentially consolidate that 4th spot, there are opportunities for Orbison to come back in. It's just whether Robinson decides to run his best 17 into the finals, or if he does give, breaks here and there. Potentially, he could even throw Orbison at the centres and give Josh Morris, Joey Manu, any of those a break just to, get ready for finals football.
Yeah. We'll just have to wait and see what comes with it. But my sentiments match yours. Just to hope that Orbison, for all his loyalty, doesn't lose out on. Basically, it's a paycheck. That's what it is. It's the NRL have seen dollar signs. The Roosters have seen dollar signs. I was reading the other day that the Roosters sponsors alone are something like a $5 million endorsement just on the kits. So they're not short on cash. The NRL's not short on cash. I just don't think that players that have put so much of their time and well-being on the line should be falling by the wayside for what is a short-term thing. But we'll get off the Roosters then, and we'll get on to another Sydney team. This time, the West Tigers. So 3 stories coming out of the West Tigers this week. I'm going to leave Chris McQueen to the end because I feel like I'm going to probably go on a bit of a Super League rant. Benji Marshall, he's been told, well, how it was handled, first things first. Benji Marshall told that he can leave. Obviously, he'll have been told in private, but the Tigers essentially just send out some media brief saying, we've notified the NRL that this will be Benji's last season. No mention of the Tigers and Benji have come to an agreement and we feel that it'll be his last season at the club. No, we've notified the NRL and his management that he's not going to be here in 2020. Benji Marshall's already outrightly said he still feels like he's got another year in him. He has been linked with a few Super League clubs. He's been linked with, off the top of my head, he's been linked with Hull FC, and I think he's been linked with Salford as well, which is a very small rumour. I don't see that happening, to be honest. But again, we're talking clubs and loyalties, and the West Tigers owe so much to Benji Marshall. Let's face it, they owe 2005 to Benji Marshall. Marshall doesn't break onto the scene, come up with some of those big plays. The Tigers probably don't go as far as they do, and they don't have a trophy at the end of the season to show for it. So it's just unfortunate to see. I mean, what's your take on things?
Yeah, he came out straight up and straight up said that he found out when the rumor was doing the media rounds. So you would think for a club where he's played the majority of his time and has taken them to a premiership, you would think that they would at least do him the favour of saying, hey, you're probably not in the plans for 2021. Let's see if we can get you a gig elsewhere, be it here or across in the UK. I would like to see him stay in the NRL. I'd like him to go to the Warriors, to be completely honest. I think that he could be almost that mentor for Harris Tavita and for Paul Turner. on a year-long, maybe 2-year contract, or potentially he goes and plays a year, and then that second year is more of a mentorship coaching role. But he still has a lot to offer to the game in Australia and New Zealand. He's potentially one of New Zealand's all-time greats. It's hard to go past the likes of Stacey Jones, Manu Vakave, Sonny Bill for what it's worth. But he still has a lot to offer. I don't want to see him spend the rest of his time in the Super League. The Super League in itself is a kind of, I hate to say second rate, but it's not the NRL. Benji can still perform to a very good NRL level, but he needs to go somewhere where he can make an impact on and off the field. There aren't many clubs that are looking for halves at the moment, but out of the ones that could, I think the Warriors are probably his best shot. He can go back to New Zealand, be a little bit closer to family if he wants to be. You can still probably get $300K a year. Like, he wouldn't be paid pennies on the dollar, and he can mentor the likes of Harris DeVita, of Paul Turner, and not necessarily impact their development. I mean, when you look at it, if he does play international football this year for New Zealand, he's going to be playing with Cody Nikorima. Nikorima is the incumbent, and he's playing well enough. He probably gets back there, so you can have that. You can have that combination. You're still mentoring Harris DeVita, who probably will be the next New Zealand half, assuming Sean Johnson eventually rolls his way out. And Paul Turner, we've only seen 80 minutes out of him, but man, he's a freak. He's an absolute freak. He'd do wonders with a year under Benji. He's already got Stacey Jones there, who's the Warriors' best ever half, potentially best ever player. To me, it makes sense, but as we've seen with not only my footy tips, but apparently both of our footy sense, according to a couple of people, we could be well off the mark there.
Yeah. I think, honestly, the worst thing for both Benji Marshall and the Super League is for him to go there. Because, I mean, to put it into perspective, we'll get on to Chris McQueen now. Chris McQueen's just left the West Tigers, now moved to the Huddersfield Giants in the UK. 33-year-old, not getting a game in the NRL, tries to basically finish his career over in the UK, as most people do. Super League needs to stop doing that, because all you basically do is you make this reputation for yourself of being a retirement home. You've got Matt Pryor at Leeds, well into his late 30s. Couldn't get a game in the NRL for this season. Moved to Leeds. You've got now Chris McQueen. Who else have you got? I mean, there's probably more off the top of my head. I can't come to mind of any, but it seems to be that Super League is becoming the place where players go to either end their careers or reboot their careers. You saw it with Barber, Hastings, Carney. If you've basically been Seguiaro as well. If you've been axed from the NRL, it seems to be that you go Super League and try and rebuild your career, and that's doing Super League's reputation no good, because I mean everybody just then buys into the thought process of Super League's a second-rate competition, and that's what it's becoming, because Super League's not attracting talent or developing talent. Because, I mean, anybody top class in Super League now, I mean, Luke Thompson's not doing great for himself in the NRL at the minute, but Luke Thompson, James Graham, Josh Hodgson, Elliot Whitehead, John Bateman, just to list a few, the Burgess boys. If you're a top class player in the Super League, you're going to the NRL. If you're a very poor player in the NRL who's not getting a game, you're going to Super League. And that's the way things are at the minute, and that's doing Super League's reputation no good, because everybody now genuinely believes Super League's a second-rate competition. Look at the years where English teams challenged for those World Club challenges. Leeds were bringing in international players. Greg Eastwood, who was almost in the prime of his career. Ali Lawatiti, who's a cult hero at Leeds. You know, his offload game, fantastic. I grew up watching Lawatiti on the wall of Headingley. Absolutely loved him. Brent Webb, who was, you know, there or thereabouts for New Zealand international halfback. Jamie Lyon at St Helens. The list goes on and on of players in that early Super League era that were attracted to come across. But it seems that Super League's either not willing to invest, or it's just a case of, oh, you know what, we'll bring in a 33-year-old who do the job for 2 years and take up a good bit of payroll.
Well, you look at it, and to harp on that earlier point of people who can't get a game, I can think of Christian Inu, Bevan French. I don't think Jamal Fogarty headed over there for a while, but you know the aforementioned Jackson Hastings couldn't get a game, or couldn't get a contract in the NRL, moves over to the Super League, and is almost immediately in the top 13 team in the league. You look at, and you mentioned the likes of the Burgess boys, really all of them, outside of Luke, all of them have made a solid impact in the NRL. Bateman, Whitehead, I would argue George Williams, been fantastic this year, one of the underrated signings. But for every Englishman that comes over, and Gareth Ellis as well, going back a few years now, but he was superb for the Tigers, kind of paved the way. But for everyone that you look at, you have someone like a Sam Tompkins, or current case, a Ryan Hall, a Callum Watkins, fantastic, legendary in the Super League, comes over, doesn't really make much of an impact. Warriors ended up getting Roger Tuivasa-Sheck because Sam Tompkins got hurt 15 minutes in. Ryan Hall can't crack a game. He's had debutants and players who've been out of the league for 2 years take spots over him because he's too slow. Callum Watkins probably got the rough end of the stick there. Decided to go, we've harped on about this before, decided to go home, got screwed over by Toronto, and is now at Salford, I believe.
Yeah, last night we'll quickly interject that story. Last night, Callum Watkins officially signs with the Salford Red Devils, which is great to see, but it does now bring major questions of who is a Toronto player for next year. Because, I mean, Blake Wallace, who was one of the initial signings, he's now gone. Liam Kay, Greg Worthington, Sonny Bill. They've said they still want Sonny Bill for next year. I don't think you get him next year. I mean, for the money that he's on, you'd hope so, but I don't think he will be back. Watkins, God, the list goes on and on of players that have now officially left Toronto and won't be back for 2021. So Toronto realistically don't have a team. So
let me pose this question to you. You said that the Super League haven't necessarily invested in themselves. Do you think that they invested too much into Toronto at the neglect and at the expense of the rest of the league itself?
So do you know what? This is a very common misconception and a common argument. So what people need to understand is that the RFL and Super League don't actually contribute any money into the clubs. They're there as governance. So they're almost like, if you follow football, they're like the FA, the Football Association. Their job is to set up fixtures, make sure games are played, and basically put punishments in place for players, officials, clubs that don't follow the rules. So their job is literally just maintaining the integrity. So they don't actually decide where the money goes, except for when it comes to things like the community pot and the Sky Sports money. But Toronto opted out of the Sky Sports money and the community pots. So Toronto didn't really take away from... I mean, you could argue that with relegation being encouraged and the London Broncos, who are your capital city team in the UK, being relegated, there's that aspect of taking away from the game. But Toronto itself never truly took away from the game, barring the fact that they've pretty much dragged the game's reputation a complete disrepute by dropping on the RFL very last minute that they won't play this year. not paying players, not paying management, not paying officials, all those things. So that's where Toronto have taken away from the game, and I think that you just hope that the new management, if there is a new management that comes in, do a better job, because by God they can't do a worse.
So I'll pose you these two questions, because I'm not a huge fan of the Super League. I'll openly admit that, and we still do have another Tigers story to get to.
Yeah,
but how do you think that what Toronto have done now could affect the New York bid and the Ottawa bid? And do you see a case, instead of the RFL trying to expand transatlantic, do you see a potential case for them breaking into other European countries? Should they focus on themselves? Should North America look at a league for themselves with Toronto, Ottawa, New York, Jacksonville, Brooklyn, California, Texas, and our friends over in Jamaica?
So, first question: do I think that the RFL will be put off by them? No, because I don't think that. So, one thing that anti-expansionists have done, or traditionalists in rugby league who want to see things like Cumbrian teams come back, what they've done is they've generalised now, and they've gone, "This is what expansion is. We don't like it. Look how bad Toronto have done." Toronto have done more damage to other teams than they've done to themselves, because now you've got New York, who are still trying to get in, who people put big question marks over. Even Ottawa, I was really optimistic over the Ottawa bid, but now I've seen the squad that they're trying to build, and people have drawn similarities to them being like Toronto in the fact that nobody's seen a Canadian player come in yet, which does, to be honest, it does disappoint me. But hopefully there'll be some to be announced, because you don't want to see Ottawa just essentially being Toronto Mark II, but just maybe slightly better managed. So I don't think the RFL will look at this as expansion on a whole is bad, and we need to now focus on teams like Carlisle and Whitehaven and all those things that, up in the north of England. So, but as for, do I think that they'll put their focus somewhere else? No, just because, again, the RFL don't go out to, I don't know, take Belgium, for example. The RFL don't go out and meet with a group of people and say, your job here is to set up a team that we can then bring into Super League. It's the other way around. Some guys from Belgium might turn around and go, we're setting up a team, we want to get them into Super League. They go to the RFL do their finances, their due diligence and all these things. And then they basically give them the nod, whether it's a yes or no. So the onus is on people. You want to see a team somewhere, go away, set it up yourself, and we'll tell you as to whether it's a runner or not. But yeah, so I can't see there being much of a change to the rugby league landscape, to be honest.
Telling you, North America, it's the way to go. It's the way to go. You look at it. 10 years ago, Jamaica were not really a thing. If we're putting it bluntly, they just set up their league competitions themselves. Not really a country that was making a mark. Yeah, I mean, we know for a long time we were on that journey.
Yeah.
As part of, way back when we were another name and another page. We were on that journey of them getting through to their first Rugby League World Cup. Canada have the potential, I think, in the next 10 years or so to get to a World Cup. They've got, if Toronto hang around, they're going to have the interest coming in. They're going to have the youth players coming in. And that's where I think potentially the RFL need to look at as well. They have an opportunity to branch into Canada still with Toronto to build up the academy system. Yes, you're right. Right now, there are not very many Canadian players for either side. But there also hasn't necessarily been a huge academy built, or there hasn't been the footmark that's been imprinted over 8, 9, 10 years, 2 decades. That opportunity is still there. America, you look at it, there are teams popping up all over the joint. You've got teams in Texas. California Rugby League is making a huge bang over there. You had, I think it was Sacramento and LA, or Sacramento and San Francisco. You've got Brooklyn and Jacksonville, who are two big hubs, and I think that that Brooklyn team could be kind of that starting point for New York Rugby League if they really want it. You've got teams coming up in Oregon, teams in Maine.
I tell you what, this is a good point to jump in on, because yesterday actually, a good mate of mine, Monty Gaddis, shout out Monty, go check out his stuff. Him and Ryan Burrows, who's a former, I think he was a Toronto trialist, but he's basically done his time in the UK as well, playing for Barrow. Done a bit of time in rugby union as well, but he's come back. He has his own team called the Nova Eagles. They came up against Monty's Cleveland, and so Monty Gaddis actually set up a team called Cleveland. So for those of you that haven't heard his name before, you may have seen, he did some time in the UK with the Shawcross Sharks. He was a Toronto trialist. He played for our club at Red Star as well. So he's been around. He's learnt his trade, and now he's doing God's work, basically trying to get the game set up in different parts of America. And he's got some great training vids, so go check out his stuff. As you know, the result didn't go his way yesterday. I think it was 70 points to 16. But just having a game between the Nova Eagles and the Cleveland and the Cleveland side is it's another big step for American Rugby League.
Exactly, and you look at it, they're setting up. I don't want to say that if there were to be a North American league, it should be a summer league, because conditions will suck. It'll be hot as all hell. But all the professional sports are during what's typically a rugby league season in the winter. I mean, at least for how I'm used to. Obviously, it's the summer over there for you guys. But you're looking at a summer in Jamaica, a summer in Jacksonville, where it's humid, disgustingly hot. Think like, for us Aussies, it'd be like trial footy weather. But the opportunity is there, especially with the, I don't know if it's still the case, but the World Cup in 5 years' time, supposedly still being in North America, they have that opportunity to build up on, the work that's currently being done in, with the Jacksonville side, with Brooklyn, now with Monty and Ryan Burrows, who, mind you, scored probably one of the best tries I've seen live in the US Cook Islands game last year. There are some really, really good sides and some really good players over there, but they need help. They need help. If someone from the IRL, or if you have a couple of Aussie players that go over there during their summer when they have a month or two, help out a little bit, there is a huge opportunity in North America, Central America, to build on the game and expand, and then set something up over there, instead of having this issue of Toronto or Ottawa or New York going into the RFL. But
speaking of help, someone else that needs help is me and you, because we've gone off on a massive tangent there, and we were talking about. And what I want to know is, I'm going to go back when I'm editing this, and I'm going to try and establish the timeline of when we went from Benji Marshall at the West Tigers all the way out to Canada, Jamaica, and the USA, to suddenly talking about US expansion and how it needs support. I don't know how we've managed to go that far off on a tangent, but we have. So we need to get back onto the West Tigers. There is one more story there. Josh Reynolds, Russel Packer leaving at halftime because they were cold.
Suffering from bitchitis. Easiest way to put it. I understand if if you don't have to be there, but if you're going to pull that, just don't show up at all. Completely agree with Benny Elias when he came out today and said they shouldn't be at training on Monday. Pack your bags, send them. These are two of your high-profile players, most expensive players. They're, all the boys are there to support the team. They leave at halftime. Doesn't look great when they're down. What was it, 20-12 or something like that?
Yeah, they weren't in the game at that point.
No, it's not a good look. Just short and sweet on this one. Piss them off. Tell them to go find another club. I wouldn't want that in my club. It's setting a bad culture for the junior players coming through.
Yeah, and it's got to be said as well, another one of our stories that we will get to shortly. Kieran Foran out injured again. Reynolds has been ruled out for a return to the Bulldogs on however many occasions, but you've got to feel that. Well, they've already told Reynolds there's no contract for you here, so he's off contract at the end of the season. So let's face it, he has 3 games at the Tigers left, and now I don't think he has any. I don't think he has anything to put himself in a shop window with, because if you're the Tigers management, you go, right, okay, we have 1 or 2 things that we do here. We either sideline you completely and keep you out, or we just turn around and we go, right, we're releasing you now. That's the end of your contract. Go off and find your new club, but there's nothing for you here anymore. Because I think part of that is that both of these players are off contract at the end of the year. I think Packer is off contract as well. I think they're just at a point where they're just kind of over it, and they just want 2021 to start. But you can't start 2021 in the RL without a club. So, and I honestly think unless they've managed to sign contracts and it's just been kept really quiet, I think that they may have just talked themselves out of contracts.
You watch, we've just bitched and moaned about NRL players going to the Super League.
Oh, don't.
Watch them go over.
I don't.
Packer at least. I think Packer will. Reynolds, I don't know. He's been hurt so much. And the same goes for Kieran Foran. They've both been hurt so much that I don't know what club would want to risk that. But look, I really would not be surprised if we see all 3 of them in the Super League next year. I really, really wouldn't.
Saying that though, Packer, what was it, 2 years ago? Or maybe even the start of this season, I don't remember exactly when. But he was basically hinting towards medical retirement because basically I think it was his leg, one of his legs was absolutely shot. So I think this could be potentially Packer's last time round.
There was an inkling around too that Foran could be a medical retirement. He's missed something or missed 47 games prior to this season based on injury. I think it was in the Daily Telegraph last week. They haven't looked at this year, but he's missed 6 or 7 already this year. Done for the year now in a shortened season. Look, man, for those 2, it could be game over. And Reynolds, maybe Reynolds goes to Toronto. maybe Reynolds does as Josh McCrone and goes to Toronto to either rejuvenate his career or sign it off.
I don't know. I think if anyone's smart, you don't touch Reynolds right now. He's got such a jaded history of going to teams and just not having a great attitude or just coming up with some really dumb plays. I mean, at the end of the day, look, you're in a team, you've signed a contract, regardless of whether you're called or whether it's anything else. You don't let things behind the scenes spill out into public because that's where speculation happens and all these things, very much like we're doing now. The moral of the story, basically, don't be a turnip. So just wind it in. Like, don't walk out on your team halfway through a game because for whatever reason, you've kicked it.
On his day, Josh Reynolds can be one of the best players in the league, can be an absolute game changer, can come on for 10 and 15 minutes and change the complex of a season. On his worst, I mean, the poor dude got killed in the media because he took a swing at a ball, just missed it and cracked Campbell Graham's jaw or cheekbone or whatever it was. That you can't harp on because if he makes contact with the ball, he's running 60 meters to score. But when Reynolds isn't interested, the Tigers need to clean out. The Tigers really, really need to clean out. They're getting rid of Benji, and how they treated him was absolute dog crap. By getting rid of Reynolds, they free up 1.2, 1.3 maybe. Potentially you throw that all at Harry Grant and say, you're the future, let's go. Or they go find someone who's actually going to be a half-decent half for them. Because Luke Brooks isn't going to be that guy. Luke Brooks is not the guy to take them to finals footy. There's going to be someone else. They throw that money at a really good half for $700-800 a year. Bring in bring in a prop, like a really, really strong prop. They've got LAI, they've got McKaylee, they've got two really good props there, but they need a little bit of help. If they can go and sign someone who has the same potential impact as Luciano Leilua this year, they're well on their way next year. But Reynolds, Packer, gone. I tell them not to bother showing up. Sit at home, get your paycheck. We'll see you on the opposite side of the field next year.
Yeah, and you mentioned Harry Grant there, and I think that'll probably bring us to our final story. The Melbourne Storm released probably the most vague, unexplained media statement of all time earlier in the week. Earlier last week, as we record now on a Monday. That basically you're going to have to wait up to another 2 months for Cameron Smith to make a decision, which is not great news if you are Brandon Smith or Harry Grant and you're kind of waiting to see where your plans lie, because, I mean, Brandon Smith has laid it all on the line, and credit to him. I'm your 9 next year or I'm not here. Harry Grant, I think he's openly said, yes, I'm a Melbourne player for 21. That's how the land lays right now. Realistically, I think if Cameron Smith does go around next year, I think Melbourne managed to retain Harry Grant, and then he plays off the bench. And I think that Brandon Smith does try to go elsewhere and basically get the 9 shirt that he feels he warrants. And, credit to him, there's a lot of players who are a little bit too political and a little bit too guarded in their response to things, and they'll sit on the fence and go, I'm here and we'll just see what happens. It's with my management. I can't control what happens off the field. No, you're the player. You're the talent. You can very much control what happens off the field. And Brandon Smith, at a young age, has figured that out quicker than most players do, and has said, look, I know that I'm a New Zealand international. I know that I'm your starting 9, and if I'm not your starting 9 next year, I'm not here. I'll be at another team playing as a starting 9. Gold Coast.
I don't know about that one. I kind of like Clark up there in Tanner Boyd. I like that little combination. I would argue very, very strongly that it's just a straight swap. Brandon to the Tigers.
Oh,
Jacob Little is not their future there. He's out more than he is in. Brandon Smith, not only can he play 9, and he wants to be that starting 9, but I think if Little was to come in for a game or two as that really fresh change of pace hook, he's got more. Like, Brandon Smith is energetic, quick, but he's a hard runner. He's a really hard runner. If things got desperate on the injury front for the Tigers, he'd slot and play 13 or could slot and play prop for a game or two. Little comes in, a little more control out of dummy half, a little slower, but a little more precise. Come on.
Potentially. I can see the logic behind it. I just don't think the Tigers is as attractive right now as a Titans side that's bringing in SASA, Fasu Malawi as well, one of his Melbourne teammates. Fafita as well, and they're probably not done on signings yet. So, I mean, I think that looks. If you're a player right now, especially with the news that they're having a $4 million clear out with the likes of Shannon Boyd going, Nathan Peets, probably Mitch Rain as well. They've got too many hookers on their books at the minute. I think that maybe if I was to pick one out of Clark and Boyd, I'd say that probably Tanner Boyd falls out of favour. Brandon Smith goes in. He becomes your starting 9. Then maybe 20 minutes to go, you rotate him to loose forward and bring on Aaron Clark. But I think that basically the Storm are on borrowed time as to actually when they need to basically either make a decision. They need to push Smith for a decision, or they need to make a decision for him and say, look, okay, things are getting out of control now. We're about to lose 2 players because you won't make a decision. Thanks for everything you've done, but we need you to make this look like this is your decision. Which I know we've just harped on about the Tigers doing exactly that to Benji Marshall and all he's done and things like that. But Smith,
there is a difference between telling him in person that, hey, we cannot afford to lose the youth and the future of our club. We're not going to re-sign you, compared to releasing it to the media. What we're done with Benji, his management's been let known, but then he finds out in the media. There is a big difference there.
Yeah,
that's also the difference between the two clubs. The Storm respect what their players have done. The Tigers don't have that respect at the moment. They're a long way gone from where they were in 2005 when you had Hodgson, Prince, Halatau, Benji, Farah.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think Melbourne need to almost get to the point now where they put a timer on it and they go, this is your decision up to this point, and if not, we need to make a decision, because Cameron Smith, if he goes again, he's not acting in the club's interest, he's acting in his own interest, which is pushing records out further, playing on for longer, which, you know what, he can turn up and he can still do it, fair enough. He can turn up and still dictate the pace of a game and control the wrestle and the floor game and all these things. But there needs to be a point where you go, I'm not what's best for the club right now. What's best for the club right now is a player like Brandon Smith and Harry Grant who's coming
in. Rugby league is a team sport, but these are individual players who are trying to get the most out of their careers to set themselves up after. Cameron Smith could be an analyst, he could be a coach, he'll do whatever the hell he wants after. He's set himself up and his family up for life. He's still one of the best hookers and one of the best players in the game. I think he absolutely should go around one more, but I think it has to be Melbourne that makes the decision of whether it's for the Storm or someone else. Smith, you talk about loyalty and we harp on players who chase the money. Smith has been a one-team player. You don't get many of those these days. Josh Morris, 4 teams. Who was the last one-team player not named Mitch Orbison?
So Anthony Minicello.
No, it can't have been Miller. It wouldn't have been it. Oh, yeah, Roosters.
Yeah.
I was thinking of his brother for a second there. But you think, Anthony Minicello, I think Gallen might have been.
Yeah,
Nathan Hindmarsh. Danny Badiris, I think, from an NRL standpoint.
Yeah, because he went to the Reynolds in Super League.
But now, but even then, Badiris, I'm pushing back 8-9 years. You don't get many one-club players. Smith, if he wants to, will play on, and if he gets the choice, will choose to play for Melbourne. But Melbourne have to make the choice, knowing that they have Harry Grant and Brandon Smith on their books for next year. They lose Movorovsky, but they're not going to be too worried about that. They know they've got outside backs up the wahoo.
Yeah. Okay then. Right. Well, I think that's going to do it there then. And thank you very much for joining us as we took you through the last week of Rugby League. If you have enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment, and we will see you for the next one.